Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday at 11 a.m. Communication Week panel. Don't worry, you clicked the right link. This is the documentary film panel, and we're going to get started with that in just a second. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jarman. I'm the director of the Elliott School of Communication, and I just wanted to join quickly at the beginning to thank a few people. I'll have some additional thanks at panels tomorrow, but I wanted to take a quick second to thank two student groups in particular who are responsible for the great production we're having this week. I want to start by thanking Jessica Newman and her 304 class for doing all of the live streaming. We put this together early on in the semester, the idea that we could use this class and teach this platform. I just want to thank all of those students for taking on that challenge and doing it as well as they've done it over these few days and tomorrow as well. I also want to give a particular shout out to Madeline McCullough and the students in the Shocker Ad Lab. That's Blake Kennison, Jared Chamberlain, Sean Yake, Ashley Schock, and Katie Dakin. Those students are responsible for the great swag that you've gotten if you filled out the survey. If you haven't, it's not too late. We still want to send you an end of the semester gift. Thanks to all the faculty and the staff, and in particular the students who are making this year's CommWeek special. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Jarman. My name is Jessica Newman. So I am the instructor for the 304 class that has been putting all of this together. And I'm really proud of the students. I would echo that thank you that Dr. Jarman just offered. We've had some excellent students behind the scenes running these. This particular session is being run by Monique Gaines. So she's behind the scenes. I'll give her a little shout out there. And so the reason we're all here today is to talk to this group of filmmakers here. We have Julian Liby and Caitlin Slemp. If you all tuned in yesterday, we did a live screening of both of their mini documentaries. So Julian Liby did Coronaspiracy and Caitlin Slemp did And She Did. And both of these mini documentaries were created while they were active students in the Elliott School of Communication. They were both in their graduate program actually at that time. They're both alums now, so congratulations to both of them for that. And they have been made within the past year. So Caitlin's was maybe a little bit more than a year ago, maybe at this point. But they've both been done very, very recently. So before we begin, I would just like to say, fill up that comment section. Of course, I've got some questions I'll ask them as well, but go ahead and fill up that comment section and we will would love to ask your guys' questions to Julian and Caitlin as well. So welcome, Julian. Welcome, Caitlin. Would you guys just want to start by maybe giving us a background of who you are before we really get into the films? Maybe Caitlin, let's start with you.
Yes, so I am the video producer and digital marketing content creator for WSU Tech's marketing team. So I create most of the stuff that you see as far as just videos and things that go on social media, and then all the video projects as well. So that is what I do professionally, as well as a freelance filmmaker. So I actually founded, through the whole process of filming And She Did, I founded my own video production company called Free People Film. And so that has kind of been my life in the last 2 years. Aside from, doing things professionally, I love to go scuba diving, go trips, all across the world. I love to travel with my husband. We love to bike, and we're big travelers. So I would say that's kind of me in a nutshell at this point in time. So.
Awesome. What about you, Julian?
Yeah, so I'm a two-time Wichita State grad. I did my bachelor's and my master's at WSU. I think the Elliott School is actually where I found my passion for filmmaking and video production. So a huge shout out to everybody who is part of the Elliott School, because they really helped push me in the direction that I am now. A little bit, I guess my path was a little bit backwards in terms of freelancing than Caitlin's. I did a lot of freelance work when I was an undergrad to buy my first set of cameras and lenses and really get myself started in filmmaking. And now that I've become the digital media strategist for the Office of Admissions at Wichita State, I do a lot less freelance work. And so I focus a lot more on the professional aspect of my career. And then I've opened up a lot more of my personal projects, more documentary filmmaking. I'm really interested in making documentaries. And so that's kind of what I want to focus on in my free time as well. And so that's a little bit about me.
Great. Thank you so much. So one question that somebody had asked yesterday while we were screening the films that I thought would kind of be a good place to start is they were asking what class these documentaries were created in. And so I thought we could kind of go over that since it's not really your traditional class and you both sort of did it in a slightly different way. Just for the information of people watching, and then I'm going to let you guys go into more detail. Both of these students made these documentaries through sort of a directed study kind of a program. They were both under the guidance of myself, actually, and so we kind of worked through their projects together. So Caitlin did hers as part of what is called the graduate professional project. And then Julian's was a directed study. And both of them, again, were done during their graduate program. However, it should be noted that directed studies can absolutely be done during your undergrad as well. So it's certainly not limited to that. So maybe Caitlin, let's start with yours, since yours was a part of the actual capstone professional project. And will you just talk us through what that process is like?
Yeah, so to start out with, you kind of, you have to do a lot of research to kind of figure out what focus you want to have and what subject you want to have. And I know when I was starting out, Lisa Parcell was my original advisor before I transferred to kind of working under Jessica since she's more video oriented. But Lisa was like, think about an issue or something within the local community, or maybe it could be expand beyond the local community of Wichita, and think about what you can do to highlight, or how something that you can do to benefit the local community. So that was kind of how she allowed me to launch off of that. And so I did a lot of research, and I started just reading things about Wichita because I'm not originally from here. So I ended up finding the Chung Report, which is actually owned by the Bashan family, who owns Fidelity Bank. And the Chung Report was a huge launch pad for me, where which those who aren't familiar with the Chung Report can kind of, so they kind of are aware. It is an economic evaluation of the state of Wichita, and it was done, I believe, in 2016 and then again in 2018. And it basically found that Wichita was falling behind other Midwestern cities of our size. So like Omaha and Tulsa, Oklahoma City, we were not growing economically as fast as them. And so James Chung essentially did an evaluation to figure out why. And so some things like, we were offering competitive opportunities for young professionals. We were actually losing a lot of young professional women, as well as minorities. They were moving because they didn't feel like there was room in the higher echelons of leadership for movement, as far as like adding women and people of or minorities into leadership. And so I started seeing how, all right, this is what Wichita was challenged to do, was essentially address these issues. And so allowing women to be in the higher echelons of leadership, offering cool opportunities that makes Wichita unique. And so I started thinking through all the women that I know and it just happened to be women. I didn't set out to make it a female-oriented piece, but I was just like, man, I know a lot of women that are doing really exceptional things that are making Wichita a more interesting, more cool place to live. And so I wanted to feature that and showcase, essentially as a follow-up to James Chung report and the challenges that he issued to Wichita. So in order for us to grow, we need to have these specific things in place, and these women are doing those specific things. So, and that was kind of the lead in to doing the documentary. So I wrote a paper, which is essentially the proposal process. You have to write a proposal. So I detail everything, the history of the movement of Wichita, moving in the more growing of our self-esteem as a city and stuff like that. So I actually I went through all that process, the historical process of Wichita growing into the local pride and stuff like that, the local pride movement. And then it kind of kept evolving as I learned more and talked to these women and actually interviewed them and started the filming process. So it was really amazing to get to know that. I feel like I have a deeper appreciation for Wichita, and I love Wichita more now after that. But the whole process it's very involved, but now I can go when I'm, when I got my job at WSU Tech as the video producer, I could essentially say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm working towards. At that time, I didn't have it finished, but it was a huge process that now I can essentially put towards a portfolio, which is everything. As a communication person, it's all about your portfolio. So I didn't want to just do the project to get it done. I wanted to make sure it was something that really brought a lot of value locally, as well as really bringing value to my my career and my profession personally. So
that's excellent. Thank you so much. This is absolutely an excellent portfolio piece for you to hang your hat on. So I mean, so many people have seen it so far, and I think it's going to make waves in our community for a long time to come. Now, Julian's, like I say, is a little bit different than Caitlin's, since hers was part of the kind of formal capstone project. Now, Julian's, I'll give a tiny background before you start, Julian, which is that originally this was last spring, and Julian and I and a couple other WSU comm students set out to make an entirely different documentary about Wichita Pride, and different than what Caitlin's was, but a little bit different. And that's actually about to come out now. And it's called Welcome to Wichita. But as we all know, COVID hit, and all of a sudden, Julian was kind of stalled, and he couldn't move on with what he was doing. And in true Julian fashion, he was like, okay, cool, let me do something else then. So he put Welcome Home Wichita on pause, and then moved on to Coronaspiracy and created this incredible mini documentary that we all watched yesterday. That was just, a response to the world that we were all living in. So then after that, like I said, he and the couple of students that were working on the other documentary, they did go ahead and finish it after that semester was over, and it will be premiering here in a few weeks. So we'll keep you all updated on that. But Julian, do you want to just talk to us about Coronaspiracy and kind of how that got started for you?
Sure. Yeah. So it definitely was not like a straight shot into that documentary. So there was a little bit of a different path that I took, just because my original documentary idea had to be put on the back burner because of COVID. And so it just kind of made sense after that maybe I should do something that's COVID related, because it's super relevant. And I'd happened to see some people that I've known since like high school. They were posting, I think I mentioned it in the documentary, somebody that I knew from high school posted a conspiracy theory online. And I was like, this is ridiculous, but people believe this. And so I was like, I'm fascinated by these theories, and even more so the people who believe them. And so I wanted to learn more about not just the theories, but kind of like the people who are susceptible to them as well. And so what I realized when I started working on the documentary was that, because of social distancing, I would probably have to conduct all my interviews through Zoom, which I ended up doing. And because of that, I could interview anybody around the world, which was really cool. So I interviewed professors from like the Netherlands, from England, and from, I think one of the professors was Russian, but I think he was teaching at Leeds or something. So he was also in Britain. But I was interviewing people from all across the world for this documentary, which was a blast. And so the really difficult thing about it was that it was really hard for me to get B-roll, because I really couldn't shoot very much of my own B-roll for this stuff. And I couldn't shoot B-roll of the people that I was interviewing either. And so it was very much a matter of immersing myself into the culture of these conspiracy theorists. I joined all of the Facebook conspiracy theory groups that I could, and just started kind of taking public footage from those groups and incorporating them as well. And just trying to get enough content to hopefully tell somewhat of a story about these people who believe these conspiracy theories related to the coronavirus.
Wonderful. Let's go. We have a couple of questions popping up. Let's start with Hannah. She is wondering, what was the most difficult part of putting these documentaries together? So I know, Julian, you just kind of mentioned that not being able to shoot B-roll was kind of a big part.
Yeah.
But Caitlin, for sure for you, and then maybe Julian, if there was something else that was kind of difficult for you as well, what would you guys say to that?
So for me, it was really about the process of always remaining nimble in the whole production phase. So I was originally working at Digital Brand, which is who I partnered with, because they provided the studio and a lot of the equipment that I used to do the studio interviews. And so I had originally set out to essentially make it more centered around so highlighted Cindy Claycomb of the Wichita City Council at the time, and then Alicia Ibarra of Vanya Designs, and Leela Meadow-Connor of Mama Film. And I was going to essentially interview their friends, their family, maybe a mentor, and just really made it center around who makes them who they are. And I ended up getting a full-time job at WSU Tech, being their video producer. And so I transitioned, and I didn't have access or direct access to the studio anymore. So I was like, well, how am I going to make this documentary still awesome? And so I was like, well, and so through the process of doing all of these B-roll opportunities with them, I ended up meeting like Lacey Cruz and Andrea Hatton, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I could actually make it more just a showcase of the network of women that are doing really exceptional things for Wichita. And so all of the women that are included in my documentary are doing amazing things individually, but together they make a really cohesive group that are really cheerleaders for each other. And so I thought, man, that's arguably much more stronger of a concept. And so I decided to do a bunch of field interviews, obviously aside from the 3 studio interviews. So I didn't let that transition derail me. I decided, all right, how do I just remain nimble and adjust and acclimate? And so that was really a huge turning point in my production process. So that was probably the biggest challenge. And then, you know, at the end, I was like, well, I really need someone to tie all these people together. And Lael, she was kind of my glue for everyone, because she offered commentary, because she's aware of everyone and she knows what everyone's up to. And so I was like, I really need her to kind of tie all these women together. And so just really looking at my story, looking at what I have, and then what I need to really bind it together. That was the biggest part, and some of the biggest challenges of doing a production piece, where it's not like a movie where you have all the parts accounted for, all of the characters accounted for at the beginning, like Julian can attest to. It's very much about like, all right, well, who can I interview to kind of fill the gap that I think I need at this time? So that was, I feel like for me, the biggest challenge that I had to overcome.
Excellent. Julian, what about you?
So besides B-roll, I think that the topic of conspiracy theories is just a huge topic in general. So I think my documentary piece was a lot of fun, and I think it's a blast to watch. I might be biased since I made it, but when I watched, I think that especially like Luke, the conspiracy theorist I interviewed, he's just a riot the whole time. But I think that in order to do the topic of conspiracy theories like justice, it needs to be a way more in-depth piece. I think it was really difficult trying to find an angle to really, I was just kind of like just talking about the subject, just kind of dissecting some of the conspiracy theories that people kind of talked about. But I think I could have dove a little bit deeper into the topic and maybe dissected it a little bit more. But it's really difficult too, because, you know, when you think about people who believe in conspiracy theories, there's such a wide variety of them. It's insane how many different theories there are and how many different varieties there are. So, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to tackle it from just the idea of conspiracy theories or specific conspiracy theories, because there's so many. And so it's almost has to be about like the psychology. So I talked to, I think, 2 psychologists who study conspiracy theories, just to kind of talk about the elements that might lead a person to be more susceptible to believing in a conspiracy theory, and then what the dangers are potentially. And then also maybe the role that social media plays in perpetuating. But we didn't really arrive at like super solid conclusions on all of them, on like in terms of people's psyche and like what leads them to potentially believe in conspiracy theories. I think was a pretty solid conclusion in that there's legitimate research done by the professionals, but everybody was kind of conflicted on, you know, does social media actually perpetuate these things? Is it dangerous or is it not? There was kind of like a confliction between the professionals, the professors' viewpoints on those as well. So that was, I think, one of the most difficult parts, was just trying to really solidify an angle on the documentary.
You know, it's interesting. Both of your answers really to that question kind of lead us into the next one that was asked here, you know, which is that documentary work is so different. And Caitlin, you alluded to this than, you know, like a scripted piece, because you're finding the story versus creating the story, you know? And so you don't go into it with some concept of exactly what it's going to look like. So to that point, Kevin Hager actually has said, you probably recorded way more than you used, which I can attest, he's right. And so how did you guys trim all that down? How did you get the story to a length that would keep people wanting to watch?
I can take this one real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's all about, I mean, because I asked so many questions to everybody involved. And when it comes to the conspiracy theorist Luke that was included, I mean, his interview was probably about an hour long. That dude could talk like none other. And he was providing way more information than I would ever be able to use. And so it was very much a matter of going through and then picking the sound bites that I know were absolutely crucial. So what do I absolutely want to include from him and then everybody else who's involved? And then also kind of like working through and finding like secondary stuff. Like, hey, these things could supplement other things people said. I'm going to include them potentially, but they're expendable. I can get rid of them if I need to. So it's about kind of curating those sound bites. So I actually interviewed 2 other conspiracy theorists in addition to Luke, and their answers just were not as compelling, or it almost seemed like they were kind of scared to talk to me. But I'm glad that they were willing to. And so they were really like being very careful about their answer. They were kind of like skirting my questions and not really providing a lot of insight into their own beliefs or why they believe certain conspiracy theories. So I ended up cutting them entirely because I thought that their answers were just useless for my purposes, unfortunately. So just being aware of the content that you have, which parts are absolutely crucial, and then others that are could be beneficial, but then you can get rid of them if you need to help get yourself down to that specific time frame that you might be looking for.
Excellent. Would you have anything that you would add to that, Caitlin?
Yeah, I mean, because mine was slightly different. Like I didn't really have a specific agenda going into it. I knew I wanted to showcase what these women were doing. So really how I approached it was I went through and, cut down all the interviews, and I was like, okay, these are good sound bites. And I think I had over 14 hours worth of interview stuff. Or footage, and I cut it down to 14 minutes between that and B-roll. And I ended up essentially doing a thematic analysis. Lisa Parcell would be proud, because this is something we do in 801, where we essentially go through and we assign maybe separate parts of your paper or what the data you're analyzing according to themes. And I decided I was going to do that with all of the specific interview footage. So I was like, all right, this is more intro statements. These are introductory statements, or this is statements specifically about these people, like their origin. So like I kind of have 3 parts in my documentary. So the second part is specifically dedicated to just the kind of their origin story, or how they got started and where they are now. And then the last part was kind of, what is the problem? What are we facing here? Maybe inspirational statements or I love Wichita statements, and then like final statements that are more like conclusionary statements. And so I had everything essentially color coded according to that. So, and then I went through and just basically went through chronologically, and I actually did my beginning, like the intro last. But everything was pretty much like what kind of soundbite like flows, and how is this absolutely integral to my narrative? And if it's not, it's out of there. I don't waste a lot of time with frills. I shout out to Eric Zoller, because he is the king of editing, and he is so good at cutting things down and making things absolutely concise. So it is constantly flowing, constantly moving, and there's an awesome pace to everything. And that's my number one concern when I'm developing the narrative. So I always look to, really prioritize, does this absolutely contribute to the narrative? Does this push the narrative forward? And if it doesn't, I get rid of it. So I'm very, very picky about what stuff goes in. It might be a good soundbite, but if it doesn't fit into the flow at that time, then I get rid of it. So it's really about being incredibly selective about what you put into your documentary, because it is very easy to be like, well, this is a really good soundbite, I want to include it. But then it ends up weighting down the pacing of your video. And then you could have people that just don't want to finish it because it's not compelling enough. So for me, that was, I wanted it to be something that really had a nice pace. So there was an emotional apex or climax. And then it was like, all right, how do we resolve this? Where do we go? And for me, that was that was the most important part of trimming down all of the things that I had, all the things that I'd filmed throughout the production process.
Wonderful. So let's get into a little bit about the why. So just as a background, the professional project as well as the directed studies, there are very, very few parameters on them. So both of these filmmakers could have done just about whatever they wanted. For one, it doesn't have to be video. A lot of students, might plan an event or have a journalistic sort of a project, or an advertising or marketing, website related, something like that. There's so many different options, but for these two, they are both excellent filmmakers. So it was pretty natural for them to fall into a film-based project. But why documentary work? You could have easily done a scripted piece or something like that. What draws you both to documentary work? Why do you love it?
So I love documentary work just because it's about telling found stories that already exist. I do like filmmaking. I like doing scripted pieces as well. But there's something that's really fulfilling, I think, about helping tell a story that exists but maybe hasn't been told yet and deserves to be told. And so that's what I really like about documentary work, is that you can kind of help give voice to a story that deserves to be told that has not necessarily been told yet. So that's what really draws me toward it.
Wonderful. What about you, Caitlin?
I think, since mine was pretty Wichita-centric, I always think you obviously hear people say, oh, Wichita's boring, or, Wichita doesn't have anything going on, or, people just think that we're kind of always behind the times. And I really wanted to show how it's quite the opposite. Like, yeah, they might not be on the front page news, but these women are doing really astoundingly awesome, cool individual things. And they're still I keep tabs on all of them. They're all, acclimating and moving forward, especially in the pandemic. I know that Alicia Ibarra is now offering virtual, custom dress, consultations online, and she has a process she's created with a web designer. And so I think, man, you talk about being nimble and being able to acclimate to the times. I want to prove that Wichita has more than people are willing to give it credit for. And yes, you can do that through really creative scripted pieces, but man, there's, like Julian said, there's stories that already exist of people being exceptional, and I don't want to highlight over or brush over that with a scripted piece. I want these people to tell their stories because they are incredibly inspirational. They're very motivated. They're hungry people. They want to make it work here in Wichita. They don't want to go somewhere else. And I think when you are able to really sit back and appreciate what Wichita has and the people and the talent that we have already here, I want people to be aware of that. And so that was a huge motivator for me. After I read the Chung report and started thinking of all the women I know that are directly answering his challenges, I was like, this is exceptional. And I feel like this is not something that people are thinking about. At least I wasn't aware of it. So that was really my motivation for it.
Thank you so much. Those are excellent points from both of you. Let's go to some questions that we have in the chat. We have CF Productions, who, for those of you who don't know, is another alum of ours named Connor Friend. And he is wondering, what's some advice that you might have for people who are first starting out on working on a documentary?
That's a good question. I can start with this one.
Sure.
What's some advice that I would give to people starting off on a documentary is just always just be willing to consider all the potential stories that are out there. So you might not think that you might hear of a story, but it might not register right away as to why that story would be documentary worthy. And so one of those stories for me was Wichita Pride, actually. So my original documentary idea was about local pride in Wichita. So I moved to Wichita in 2014, which is about the time that the Wichita flag was being revitalized and the support local movement was starting and the hashtags were starting and everything. And so when I moved here, it wasn't long before I realized that, that we had a flag and that people loved Wichita. And so I assumed Wichita was always proud of itself. I was like, Wichita's always been about Wichita. This is pretty cool. It didn't seem like that there was a story there for me though. It never crossed my mind until somebody that I worked with told me that she remembered when Wichita used to be lame. And I was like, oh, well, when was that? Was that like in the 90s? How long ago was that? And she was like, oh, like 4 years ago. And I was like, that was when I moved here. It's only been within the past 4 or 5 years that Wichita's become really proud of itself. And so that's when I saw it. I was like, I think there is a story here now. I think there's definitely a story here because of how quick this turnaround has been on local pride. And so I started digging around and finding all the different people who were involved with the flag and the hashtags and the local support and everything. And so I was like, oh, there's so many people who are involved in this. And I was like, this seems like a pretty cool story because it was such a grassroots thing. A lot of it was done with no budget. And so it was just a lot of people's pride and passion. It really wasn't, anything besides that, which is really cool. And so what originally seemed like something that was a non-story to me, just because I thought it had always been, actually turned out to be a very compelling story in my opinion. And so, always just be keeping that in mind, just be thinking about the different angles that you could take on any given topic, because there might be a story there, even though you don't think that there is one.
And I love that. The fact, Julian there was kind of talking about his documentary that is now completed, but we haven't actually screened yet, called Welcome Home Wichita. And it's so fascinating to me as someone who grew up in the Wichita area. And of course, I remember that time when, when I was going to college, people were like, oh yeah, don't stay in Wichita, get out, go do things, whatever. And it's so different now. And it's like warms my heart that you two who were not from here undertook the challenge of telling that story of, reviving, Wichita. And so kudos to both of you for that. It's really fantastic. This next question is from Hannah. And I want to give Hannah a shout out. She's from my audio production class, and I'm pretty sure Hannah has been active in almost all of our sessions so far this CommWeek. I think I've seen a question from her on like every single panel. So way to go, Hannah. And she says, I know this is vague, but what kinds of questions give more compelling or interesting answers? And so I think what she means by that is when you're doing interviews, what types of questions get you good answers?
I know for me, I always ask questions, especially, so say I'm asking someone to talk about someone else, and people are much more willing to brag on other people than they are themselves. But I always ask very like, all right, so what is this person's key to success? What makes them effective at what they do? So when I was asking Lael about, Leela Med-O'Connor and what makes her effective at, her or the mama film concept, she was willing to go in and be like, well, I think she really is showcasing how, screening a film is a very intimate experience. And we get to do that maybe in a more communal environment with other people versus in like more corporate theaters where it's a very isolated, separate experience. It really breeds community. And I was like, wow, that's really exceptional. That's an amazing answer. But even when I was, interviewing Cindy and Alicia and Leela, I was like, tell me what makes you the most effective, or motivator questions. What keeps you motivated? What is your ultimate goal? Or, things that are just really, they're very specific, but also allow for a lot of elaboration. And I think for me, I always look to examine the why, like what motivates someone and why are you motivated? And so regardless, wherever that is coming from or whatever that's surrounding, as far as subject matter, people love to give their why. And I think it goes back to kind of Simon Sinek that says, people don't care what you do, they care why you do it. And so when you're talking about focusing on someone and why they're a significant person for you to be filming for your documentary, always asking the why questions are, for me, the key to really getting very meaty and very content-rich answers.
Excellent. Julian, I want to ask if there's anything you would add to that, but I also would specifically love for you to get into your challenges in terms of the way that you asked questions, because, you and I talked a lot about this while you were working on the project. It was a very kind of controversial type of a thing. And I thought you did an outstanding job of coming in from a very neutral place and really gaining the trust of the people that you were interviewing and not making them feel like you were, out to make fun of them or whatever. So maybe you could even address it from that sort of an angle of how did you ask these, hot button issue questions in a way that allowed people to open up to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was really important. to gain the trust of the people, especially conspiracy theorists. Because I mean, in general, I am not on the conspiracy theorist side. And I don't make that known to them. I try and I approach them in a sense that like, this isn't an opportunity for me to like make fun of you or to like skew your words out of context. I want to learn more about your perspective and learn more about what drives your passion behind conspiracy theories. And so, I mean, my general interview process is similar to Caitlin's. A lot of my why questions have to do with, what drives your passion behind X, Y, or Z. Why are you passionate about this topic? Why are you passionate about what you do? And why do you do what you do or believe in what you believe or that kind of thing? And so I just make sure that when I'm interviewing them that I'm not coming across as combative. Occasionally, if a conspiracy theorist would say something kind of outlandish, if I were to ask a rebuttal question and that like I was kind of challenging them, I would probably word it in a soft way, like I think one time when I did that, I was like, I love that point. I love the point that you made about whatever it is with your conspiracy theorists. Now, people on the opposing side would probably in response say this to what you just said. So how would you respond to their response to you? And so like I would phrase it in a way that like, it's not me saying, well, I disagree with you. Here's what I have to say. What do you say? I say, people on the other side, not me, people on the other side would say this. So what's your response to that? And so I try to really come across as somebody who is neutral, but also like I'm not here to argue with you in any way. And so it's similar to, I'm working on another documentary right now about the mask mandate in Wichita and the large group of anti-mask people who've come up. There's a large group on Facebook of them. And they've been very open to letting me interview them as well, because I come across as, it's like, I'm not here to, ridicule you. I just want to talk. I want to hear your perspective. And it's just about letting them talk, not arguing with them and not trying to stifle them or anything, but just really letting them share their piece. And so I think that's kind of vague. I hope I got to the root of your question there, but I just try not to come across as combative.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from having watched you work through the process now on a couple of different documentaries, something I always find fascinating about you, Julian, and I think what makes your questions so good and the way that you approach your documentary work so good is that Julian is just a genuinely curious person. Like Julian just wonders about life and he wonders about people and he likes to hear about people. And when I see you interview people, that's what I see is just a genuine curiosity from you that doesn't come from an agenda, that doesn't come from an angle, that's just like, hey, tell me about you. And so to Hannah's question, I think that helps a lot, is just framing everything that you ask from a point of genuine curiosity. All right, let's move on here. Ashok would like to know, Julian, what are some of your goals after you branch out from Wichita State?
That's a good question. I tell people that my dream job would be to be a documentarian for National Geographic. Not like nature documentaries. I don't want to go film like snow leopards, but people-based documentaries. I would love to continue telling human stories in a larger capacity. And so I think that in terms of academically, so I'm not completely branching away from WSU because I work there full time now. But academically, as I branch away from WSU, I would hope to continue to do documentary work in larger and larger scales, hopefully.
Wonderful. Yeah. Currently, both Julian and Caitlin work within the realm of Wichita State, with Julian being in admissions at WSU and Caitlin working with WSU Tech. So I am hopeful we don't lose them from our campus anytime soon. But Caitlin, I would also love to pose that question to you. Where do you think filmmaking for you will go in the future? What are your hopes there?
I would also like to be a documentary filmmaker. But I think specifically I would like to just focus on, I don't know, positive things, like, and this is a note, like, I know I'm not putting anyone else down, so this is not, but I think for me, like, man, there's so much really hard things about the world and a lot of hard truths and like 2020 has been a very difficult, challenging year for all of us, but focusing on like stories that really are encouraging and they tell the best of humanity. For me, that would be my specific focus. So I like I would love to do a documentary film with Jenny McDonald, the owner of Jenny Dawn Wine, because I think she's an exceptional entrepreneur and an exceptional woman, and I really admire her. So I would love to do a film with her, but I like to do films about, if you will, the little people, not like, I don't want to do big things. I just want to keep it very community minded, because I think that is honestly what brings the most value to Wichita and to us locally. And when you're talking about making a change and affecting change on a local level, for me, that is where I see the most value for my personal passions. So I would love to do one with her, but I think finding people that you really admire and doing documentaries about them and making that just a thing that I do, is something that I would be really excited about, because it's like figuring out those people that are doing really exceptional things, but they're not necessarily on a huge scale. They're not Jeff Bezos. They're just doing something local here. And to me, that is what gets me the most excited. So that's where I see myself going.
I love that. Yeah, you seem to always be pulled to telling the stories of people whose stories might not be told without you. And I think that's profound and awesome that you approach your work that way. We have a quick logistics question from Dr. Tennant, Ian Tennant. He's one of our journalism faculty here. And he's wondering, Caitlin, specifically about the drone footage. For those of you that don't know, drone footage, you need to be a licensed drone pilot. There's permissions and things like that. So he's asking, how did you procure that?
So that was another huge part of my documentary that I'm very proud of, because I think that my documentary very much came to be more of a community. It was a community effort to make it. And I am super proud of that, because, very rarely can you accomplish great things in a vacuum. You need the help of other people who have resources. So it's a great question. I was Googling the Chung Report on YouTube, and I came across the Chung Report. Again, it's a online journal that is owned by the Bastian family. And so I started watching a whole bunch of their videos, and they had interviewed James Chung, Sherry Utash, a professor at Wichita State, I forget his name, Janelle King, a lot of these community drivers of this change. And I was like, man, that is incredible drone footage. And it really just allows you to paint Wichita in a broader picture versus just getting the footage that I could maybe get driving around with my camera. So I approached the Chung Report and I asked, hey, would you guys be willing to donate your footage to my documentary? And so I ended up getting in contact with Katie Grover, the executive director of marketing at Fidelity Bank, she also works with the Chung Report. And she said yes. So I essentially got her an ask list of all the clips that I wanted from all the different various videos that they had made. And then they got me all of those clips and I plugged them in. And that was literally one of the last things I had to do. So I was waiting on them to get a lot of that B-roll finished. And it really, I felt like, put the finishing touches on my documentary, from, transitioning it from just something that maybe seemed a little bit more eye level to over. That was my hope, was to make it seem pretty high level. This is we're above this and we're looking down and we're showcasing all these women, versus just this is what you can see from everyone's eye level. And so that was huge. I am super thankful to them for being willing to donate some of that footage to my project, because it really transformed my documentary, I would say.
Awesome. Thank you for kind of walking us through that process. You definitely had to kind of weave a web to get all the pieces that you needed there. I love this question from Joey Nichols. I'm excited to see what your guys' answer is. What's your favorite documentary that you've seen, and or has there been a documentary that maybe motivated you? So I'll let you both take that one.
Sure, that's a really good question. The documentary that I always return to, that I think has had the most influence on me, that's really impacted me, the name of the documentary is A Band Called Death. And if you haven't watched it, you definitely should. It's a music documentary about, they were a band from Detroit, and it was in the 70s, and it was three brothers. And they were playing punk music. They wrote and they recorded a punk album before punk was even a thing. It was like when disco was huge, and they couldn't get signed because nobody wanted to sign a band whose name was Death. They're like, oh, that's too morbid. We don't want to sign somebody like that. So it took them forever to find somebody who would sign them and help them record their album. And they ended up just kind of fizzling out because it just wasn't the right time or place for them as a group. And so it wasn't until I think within the past 5-10 years that their record resurfaced, and they were like, oh, these guys were playing punk before any other bands were playing punk. And so it was such a cool story, and they found the brothers and they interviewed them all again to see where they were and to tell their story. And it's just a really neat piece. And there's a local story, a music story locally that I would love to tell someday. And so I've been taking pointers from this documentary because I hope to tell this local music story very soon. And so I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from a band called Death, for sure.
Wonderful. I can't wait to hear about that. Caitlin, what about you? What's inspired you?
So this, I was super into the Planet Earth documentaries where it talked about like the savannah, like the savannah, I think they're in Africa, sorry. And then like in Iceland, and it just goes and shows like the specific, sometimes it'll be like about a specific thing, like in Antarctica, the emperor penguins and their migration patterns and like the cycle of like giving birth to little baby penguins and stuff like that. But like the cinematography is mind blowing, and they are so invested and integrated into the life of the animals that they're featuring or whatever. And they capture all the little moments, and it's very subtle. Some of them are just little things, but it is like, to me, it's like mind blowing. As a filmmaker, I love catching those subtle, small moments because they go to really contribute to create a really powerful, impactful story. And so for me, like, being as hungry and motivated as those people who spend hours and hours and hours like out in like the savannah lands watching, and please don't judge me, I don't know the terminology, but like, filming the lion prides, hoping to catch those little moments. I want to be like that. And so that is what kept me motivated throughout my documentary. Was I never want to just take the easy way out. I never just want to find the low hanging fruit. I want to look for all the ways that I can add value and add, current things to make this really culturally rich. So to me, that was a huge inspiration for my just film style, to always be motivated to wait for those tiny moments and those little moments that really create a really huge and impactful film. Excellent. And I think from my time of watching The Lion King, I think you're right. Lion prides, I think is the term. I could be wrong. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. So look, another one. Oh, this is not so much a question, but Madeline is suggesting a documentary called My Octopus Teacher. Have either of you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, I haven't seen it either. So we'll have to jump on that. Thank you so much, Madeline. So we are at about 50 minutes, so we can certainly still go for a while. I've got a couple of things that I would like to ask you guys, but for those of you watching, there's still plenty of time to pop in your questions. So feel free to toss something up there if you would like to have these two amazing filmmakers answer that. Something that I would love to know, and this may be possibly a shameless plug for our college, but since it is CommWeek, I feel like it's okay to do so. Since both of you did this through your time in the Elliott School of Communication, you're both graduates of our program. Julian, you with both undergrad and grad. Can you guys just maybe tell us a little bit about your time in the Elliott School and maybe how it shaped who you've become now?
Yeah. I always give like unending credit to the Elliott School, in particular. I mean, especially in my graduate program, because what I found was that, throughout my master's program, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to do video work, like as part of, standard curriculum, the standard courses that are offered. And so I ended up doing comprehensive exams, which allowed me to do 2 directed studies. And that's how I fit in some more video work, one of which was a short film. And then I did the documentary Coronaspiracy. I did it through Jessica's applied video production course. I think it was like a 600 level course that I could take for graduate credit. But I approached it as like I have a specific project I want to do. Can we make this a directed study? Because I'd used up all my directed studies. And so we went ahead and we shaped it that way. And so I'm very thankful that the Elliott School has always been willing to work with me on letting me pursue the projects that I really want to pursue. Even if I was technically out of directed study credits at the graduate level, letting me use an undergraduate course to still pursue a documentary piece, 2 documentary pieces actually, which I'm really thankful that I have 2 pieces out of that class now that I'm really interested in. So actually, I don't think the Elliott School has ever told me no on any of the things that I wanted to do. Whether that was a short film, a documentary, a photography project, the Elliott School's always been like, yes, and what can we do to help you? And so I'm always glad that, I have the ESC behind me and that I have their support. So
thank you so much for saying that. I know that you're right. I've been through our program as an undergrad and a grad, and now I'm teaching here. And I think that especially in the graduate program, I'll give Dr. Parcell a little shout out here. Like you said, the graduate program doesn't have emphasis areas like our undergrad does. So in the base curriculum, there isn't necessarily always a video course you could take or always things like that. And so something that all of our graduate students do is they make their own education. And that's been the experience when I went through it. And I've seen both of you do the same thing, is really creating what you want to do and who you want to be. And you both took that opportunity and ran with it. So Caitlin, let's move on to you on that one.
So for me, I didn't actually go through the Elliott School for my undergrad. I just did general studies. So coming into it for my master's classes, I was really excited by the idea that I could kind of essentially make my own emphases, if you will. So I was really into social media as far as just really analyzing effectiveness. And this was now like 3 years ago. So we didn't have the analytical power that Facebook and Instagram have now. So it was really as everything was getting shifted to that more numbers based advertising on digital media as far as social media is concerned. And so I started doing my own correlations. I started looking with different formats of how many emojis does it take to get more engagement. And so I really essentially tailored all of my projects to be around social media. So when I came out, I had a lot of my own original research. And then I also, through that process of running social media channels for some friends that had small businesses, they were like, hey, do you do video? And I was like, yeah, I do video. And I had really no video experience. But I was like, well, I'm going to learn. So I taught myself how to work Premiere Pro. I taught myself how to learn the basics of After Effects. And then I ended up getting an internship at Digital Brand. And that was a huge launch pad for me to just learn how to edit with larger quantities of footage. And so if you are a really motivated and hungry student that you want to essentially, what you want to do, this will be the platform that you can do that with. And I think the Elliott School is really conducive to really making your own educational experience. And then you have the theory stuff like, theories of communication from Dr. Dooley that allow you to have a little bit fuller understanding of communications as a whole. But for me, it was really beneficial because I am very motivated. And even if you feel maybe a little bit more free form about it, you still have that opportunity to do that. So it's whatever you make it. And I think where a lot of academic programs are super rigid, I liked the ability to essentially make it however I wanted. And that was really awesome for me. So.
Thank you. Thank you for those candid responses, both of you. That kind of brings me to a question that I wanted to ask, which is that, we foster for students. We love when students bring in their own ideas and create these amazing projects like what you guys have done. But what I have seen, particularly in younger or novice videographers, is that they see something like what you guys have created and they're like, whew, that's overwhelming. I could never do that. So my question for you guys, would be, were you ever overwhelmed during the process? And I know the answer from both of you on that, but if you were overwhelmed, what did you do? How did you take something from the very beginning all the way to this huge project that people might look at and go, whoa, I could never do that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I get overwhelmed all the time. I got overwhelmed with Welcome Home Wichita, the documentary that we're going to be releasing in the next couple weeks about local pride in Wichita. It really came down to after I got together, I put all of the interviews together in Premiere, and I started chopping them up and like separating the different quotes and things. And I kind of like, as I was going through and organizing stuff, I was like, can I do this? Can I tell this story? Do I have everything I need? And I was like, I don't even know if I can do this. And so it was just very much a matter of just, persevering through that and just really diving in and just making sure that I was as aware of as possible of all the content that I have, of all the quotes that I have to make sure, and just revisiting my notes too. What I need to hit on, what was the timeline of local pride growth in our city and everything like that. And just making sure that I am telling the story to the best capabilities possible with what I have at the time. And so same thing with Coronaspiracy. I got all of these different interviews and I went, do I have everything? Like, is this going to make sense? The story that I'm trying to tell with the things that the conspiracy theorists said and then what the professionals said, can I put these together? And so after I listened through every interview a couple times, it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, these people talked about the same thing. And then like, I think one of my favorite parts was one of the professors said that the people who are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories typically have a difficult life. That if you are more likely to see that society, if you've been dealt a bad hand, you're going to be more likely to think that society's rigged against you. And if you think society's rigged against you, then it's not a large step to believe that there are multiple ways that, things are rigged against you. And then the conspiracy theorist said, he was like, I can't remember his exact quote, but he said, the people who are awake aren't the people who've had a good life. They're the people who've been dealt a bad hand and everything like that. So I was like, oh, this guy, like he provided this on his own accord, without any prompting. He said this, and I was like, oh, this is exact proof of what the professional said. And so that moment I was like, okay, no, there's something here because there are connections between the different interviews that I've done. And so it was a matter of just really sitting down and just working through it and just making sure that, I am very familiar with what people are saying and what I have in the interviews.
Excellent. Yeah, somebody mentioned this yesterday when we were screening your film, and I would have to agree with them that you hit the jackpot with Luke. That was his name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the stuff he gave you, I just so appreciated how open he was with you and how candid he was with you. I thought he was one of the stars of your film for sure.
Oh, he made it. Yeah, he made that film. He was definitely on something. He was smoking through the whole, and he was drinking too. Oh, he was out of it for sure.
My favorite part is still when he makes fun of your hair. Like,
yeah, I hadn't had a haircut in months because of COVID. And so, yeah, the first thing he said, he started making fun of my hair. And so.
So good. Well, as of now, we don't have any more questions popping up. But if anybody else has a last one, please feel free to put those up there. But I would like to say thank you to both of you. One for coming on today, but also since I got to watch your guys' process of growth through this project, and also am happy to call you both friends now. Thank you for all that you've done for our university, with both of you working, on campus, and for the Elliott School. We love being able to say that you guys are Elliott School alums because you have just done so many amazing things, and we were honored to bring you here for CommWeek. So thank you very much. For those of you watching, we do have 2 more sessions in CommWeek this week. So our 12:30 session today was actually canceled just due to some personal issues that our speaker had. So that one will not be happening. But then tomorrow we have our keynote, which is Lacey Cruz. She'll be coming at 9:30, and she was actually on Caitlin's documentary. So you got a little preview to her there. And then we also have Dalton Reynolds Black, who will be at 11 a.m. tomorrow as well. So we're in the home stretch. But again, thank you guys so much, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.